Hello again, YouTubers. Ultimate SpongeBob 11 back here again on the SpongeBob channel for our very first episode review video for SpongeBob Season 4. We're starting with episode 61, Fear of a Krabby Patty and Shell of a Man. This hypnosis states, with the Krusty Krab's new open 24 hours policy, the employees must work round the clock. Also, Mr. Krabs loses his shell right before a big reunion with his old buddies. Let's dive right in. One of the most significant periods in SpongeBob history is undoubtedly the transition from Season 3 and first movie over to Season 4, and there's one view suggesting that the transition meant a beginning of a downward track for SpongeBob. In more recent years, the nostalgia factor has certainly improved the reputation of Season 4, and personally I accept the fact that there was a rather drastic change from Season 3 over to Season 4, but it might just be described with the word experimentation, and I feel that Fear of a Krabby Patty takes that experimentation to a whole new level. It doesn't just represent the dawn of a new era for SpongeBob, but it actually introduces a drastically new animation style and tries to tie various themes, including Plankton's plots and Mr. Krabs' greed, together with the idea that too much of a good thing is not really a good thing. The concept of moderation was something that had an impact on me as a kid, and, I'll take it as a good takeaway. In this episode, Krabs takes his business to the edge by forcing his employees to work 23 hours a day and then shortly takes it up a notch to 24 hours in order to keep up with Plankton. And aside from the indisputable employee abuse, I don't really understand why Krabs would see the need to do this, since it doesn't actually mean he is taking customers away from Plankton. No one ever eats at the Chum Bucket, so Krabs is clearly retaliating in a tit-for-tat manner, but if you think about it, a Krabs Plankton business rivalry isn't much of a competition at all. It's always been clear that Krabs crushes Plankton by a landslide. So, Chum is not a substitute for Krabby Patties, and therefore there isn't any reason for Krabs to force his employees to work even harder when the return on investment is literally negligible. I do have to give props to the writers for the very creative and diabolical plot on part of Dr. Peter Langton, aka Plankton, to mess with SpongeBob's brain in order to extract the formula that way. He places a sham order for 10,000 Krabby Patties, and Krabs automatically forces SpongeBob to get to work without a single thought about whether that order is actually practicable. Even after 43 days, the order is still not finished. So considering the fact that Krabby Patties probably don't have a particularly long shelf life, it doesn't make any sense how they're actually going to succeed at delivering that order. Eventually, as a result of a chronic lack of sleep, SpongeBob begins to perceive all living beings as monstrous Krabby Patties who are out to get him, and he resorts to visiting pseudo-psychiatrist Dr. Peter Langton. It's pretty silly how SpongeBob voices out that name, and it doesn't even ring a bell to Krabs as the person who ordered the 10,000 Krabby Patties in the first place. But anyways, my favorite scenes in this episode are undoubtedly the piano scenes. They're just so hilarious and at the same time so dumb, Some dumb humor is always a good thing in my life, at least. Frustrated that SpongeBob is not divulging the formula, Plankton resorts to hypnosis, but what he really does is give SpongeBob time to sleep, and through that, he no longer fears Krabby Patties. So this episode ends with Krabs reverting to 23-hour workdays. Again, not sure how that makes business sense, but oh well. The plot gets 8 out of 10, although I find Krabs' action a blatant overreaction to perceived competition. It was a necessary ingredient in allowing Plankton's plan to have some initial success, and the subsequent spectacular failure of Plankton's plan was indeed very fun to watch. The fear of Krabby Patty stems from the non-stop work conditions SpongeBob experienced, and so, as I said earlier, at least there was a moral of the story at the end of the day, being moderation. I'm not sure whether Krabs or SpongeBob do understand it at the end of the episode. Animation gets a 9 out of 10. The style in this episode reminds me of SpongeBob comics in the early 2000s. Giving specific episodes a unique art style is something that definitely deserves creative points. Unique characteristics gets a 8 out of 10. This episode is fundamentally a Plankton attempting to steal the formula kind of episode, but it is augmented with the very different approach by Plankton. While SpongeBob really suffers in this episode, I still enjoyed it overall as an introduction to a new era of SpongeBob, and it gets 25 out of 30. Next up, Shell of a Man doesn't leave a likewise significant impact on me. Basically, Krabs shows SpongeBob some of his treasures from his Navy days and is preparing to go to a Navy buddy reunion. I really like the part where SpongeBob gets the kitchen ship-shaped as a standalone scene. SpongeBob then hears sounds of distress coming from Krabs' office, and after subsequent investigation, discovers that Krabs has molted his shell. Krabs then has the brilliant idea of SpongeBob impersonating him and going to the Navy Buddies reunion on his behalf, and it would presumably go swimmingly considering SpongeBob's refined skills in pretending to be Mr. Krabs. Generally, everything goes fine until SpongeBob accepts Torpedo Belly's world-famous belly bash or something like that, after which the shell then cracks and shatters, revealing SpongeBob as the imposter. Of course, in order to save his reputation, Mr. Krabs jumps out and reveals the truth that he had molted. It then comes to light that all the manly Navy buddies that Krabs also had secrets, and they too reveal those secrets. So I guess the moral of the story here is that sometimes embarrassing secrets aren't that reputation shattering. It's mostly because of how the person holding that secret actually perceives that secret. I'm not sure if I entirely agree with this moral of the story, if you want to call it in 100%, but that's more of like a philosophical thing, right? So overall, it's nice to see some initial development regarding Armor Abs Krabs' past, and it's really cool to see new characters in the form of Krabs' Navy buddies. Will we see them again? As of 2022, I do not know, but would I want to see them again? My personal opinion is, barring additional character development for the entire group, as a Navy buddy group, it will be somewhat unnecessary to see all of them again, but who knows, maybe we'll see them in Camp Coral, which does have a setting in which Mr. Krabs is younger. The plot gets a 7 out of 10 from me. No part of this episode felt unnecessary, although I do have to say that the Navy buddy gathering felt really rushed, but it did do the trick. It might not be a bad thing at the end of the day. They had to fit everything into 11 minutes for the segment after all. Animation-wise, I will give it a 6 out of 10. Now, there were some really nice scenes, like SpongeBob bouncing around inside of Mr. Krabs' shell, the kitchen ship-shaped scene with the accompanying music, which really is my favorite part of the episode, as well as the additional bouncing around at the end of the episode. Now, all of those were fine, but again, nothing too special, nothing too out of the ordinary. And so that brings us to unique characteristics. Now, although animation doesn't have too much out of the ordinary, I still will give unique characteristics 8 out of 10. Because we have to remember the context in which this episode came out, right? This came out in a time where we really didn't have much information about Mr. Krabs' backstory. And this episode provided that information in a rather interesting way, blending the history with a present challenge that Krabs faces as a result of his increase in belly size as he grew older. So hopefully Krabs gets a new Navy uniform to wear, but if he doesn't, I guess it's just too bad. All in all, Shell of a Man gets 21 out of 30 from me. So that's all for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, like, favorite, comment, or keep right here on Ultimate SpongeBob 101. And I'll see you guys in the next SpongeBob video. Bye!